Welcome to this video that shows off some features of Microsoft Azure WebJobs. WebJobs is a way for you to run your code as simple batch processing in the Azure platform, and it is a feature which is now generally available in Microsoft Azure. My name is Magnus Martinsson, and I'm a Microsoft Azure Most Valuable Professional, and you can easily reach me if you have any follow-up questions, either online or an email below. I did a previous recording called the Hello World Web Job, where I go through all of the fundamentals of Azure WebJobs, how to set one up and how to deploy one into Azure. This is not that video. I urge you to go and look at that video first if you haven't done so. I will continue with showing off some features in a separate demo. This demo is going to be about Azure Storage WebJobs. So I'm going to show you the storage features of integrating your WebJobs with Microsoft Azure Storage. To kick it off, I will launch myself a website here that I have. I will start this website, and this is a website that I actually deploy into Azure for my presentations that I do, and to get some audience participation going and to generate some data that I then show to my audience. So I will write myself a blob name here, like for instance test, and I will send myself a nice message, Magnus love. I will send myself some love. I hit the send message button and my message is sent into somewhere. Where is this somewhere? I'll show you the code behind here. The post action of my form goes and actually JSON serializes my message body, creates myself a little message, and creates a Cloud Queue message which is added to an Azure Storage queue. So this Azure Storage queue obviously then exists up here in Azure in my storage account, and it's right there. It's called Live Demo Messages. If I double click that one, it now has an actual message inside of it. And you can see that the body of the message down here is the file name test.txt and the body Magnus Love. Alright, there you go. So I have a message in a queue and it's sitting there to be processed, waiting to be processed by my web job. I haven't shown you my web job yet, and I will do so now, and then I will launch the web job and have this message processed. So back in Visual Studio, let's take a look at my WebJobs code for this demo. The startup of the job host is similar to what you have seen before, probably, but there's also a job host configuration parameter which I send in here, and I do so in order to be able to set the specific property of the queues function there, the max polling interval. And it's a good way to set that for demos. The default is 30 seconds, and if I don't set it to a lower value when I'm doing demos, it's going to take a long time to actually show up with any breakpoints that I set. So usually you don't want to set it to this low, but for a demo it's great. Here's my first web job method. It's called process messages, and what it does is that it triggers on the queue trigger, has a queue trigger for live demo messages, and then receives an object called message into this method. And it's funny that this is not a string, it's actually a type called message. I will show you that below. You can also see here there's a property called another method parameter here called file name, and it's kind of a funky one because it has a capital F here. I will show you why in a minute. We'll set a breakpoint in this method right here, and I will show you when I hit that breakpoint. So whatever I do in this method is very, very simple. I take the body of the message and I output it into a string, actually, which is a binding to a blob. This attribute here is called the blob attribute, and it's a blob binding attribute which will send a file with the file name that I had into the live demo messages container into my blob storage account. And as you can see here, I'm using squigglies to inject the file name from the message into the storage and use that method the file name when I output my blob. I go to my next message. Oh, by the way, here's the message. Here's the message class. You can see it's a standard POCO class with a property called file name and a string body. Now that maps, of course, to the message, the JSON serialized message that I sent in. And the cool thing here, if I go back up again, is that WebJobs will automatically assume that if you say you want a body with the shape of message, it will assume that this is a JSON serialized object, and I will go and deserialize it and fill out all the properties here, which is why I then also can pick out by just declaring one property from the message, I can pick out the file name and reuse it inside of my blobs here. It's pretty cool that I can do these things. Alright, so let's go down to my second WebJob method. This one does a similar thing as before. It triggers on something, but this time it's not a queue. It triggers on the blob trigger. Whenever a blob is put into the live demo messages folder, this method gets invoked. And you can see here that I'm reusing the file name thing here and pulling the name into my method, and I'm actually reusing that below here, which is pretty cool that I can do that. I'm also outputting from this method, and I'm outputting into an Azure Storage table. Now, it is a little bit different here than before, because the methods above, I've only used concepts like strings and such to read and write to Azure Storage. I'm not using any Azure Storage references at all. With the cloud tables, it's slightly different because cloud tables are a little bit more complicated, honestly, compared to blobs, which is just file storage, and queues, which is just get message, delete message off a queue. So in the table scenario, I'm actually referencing straight to the Azure Storage table, cloud table type here. But I can then use this table called live demo messages and write messages onto that table. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to create myself a table row. I'm going to add a partition key and a row key. And if you don't know what a partition key and a row key is in an Azure table, don't worry about it. Go and read up on this because it's an Azure table storage concept. I need a unique key for this row, and that's the part that I've highlighted here. And I also, of course, go in and put the file name and the message into my table, and I insert I make a table operation, and I insert my table row into my table. Final thing I'm going to show you is my table row object, and it's a table entity which has a property of file name and message. So this is the WebJobs code that I'm going to run, and I'm actually going to remember to set one more breakpoint here to see the properties of this guy. And I did set a breakpoint up here in the other method. So I have a couple of methods. One reads from a queue, writes to a blob. The other one triggers on a blob, the same blob, and writes to a table. So I'm going to go and start this guy now and receive this message, which we have waiting for us over on the Azure Storage queue. So what I go and do is I say I want to debug and do a new instance of this guy. And as you can see, immediately it picks up and processes notices that there are two WebJob functions, and it'll immediately trigger on the first one and see that there is an actual incoming message. And as you can see, it's nice and deserialized for me. I don't have to worry about that, the JSON deserialization. I also get the file name property for that I wanted right there, and I can just hit F5 to continue down the line. And now the blob trigger. It might take a while for the blob to trigger. It was actually quite fast, but it isn't usually equally fast because I can't set the interval for the blob trigger to be anything, but there is a polling mechanism that goes back and checks to see if there are new blobs in the blob storage. And so there I have my text reader, which reads my blob. I have the name of the file, test.txt. I've created myself a table row, which I will now go and insert into my cloud table. Hit F5 again, and the whole thing is done. So If I now go back to Azure Storage, I'll actually leave this running. If I now go back to Azure Storage and see, I shouldn't have a message inside of my queue anymore. It's gone. What I should have done is to take that message and put it over into a blob container, which we called live demo messages. And fair enough, sure enough, there is a test.txt message in there. I double click that and I see that my message is inside of that file. So my first web job method was able to pull a method off of a queue and write it to a blob. The second one was to pull the message off of the blob and write it into an Azure table. So it picks up this test.txt message and creates a table where my demo message was entered. And if I open up that and look inside, I can see that there is indeed a row inside of my table called test.txt, and my message is in there. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to head over to the Azure Storage, to the Azure portal, which I have here, and I'm going to see if there are any functions running that I have some diagnostics from. Of course there is the process messages and there's the blob to table method, and they have each been invoked once, and both of them were successful. So the reason that I use this demo, this specific demo with a live audience, is first of all to get some nice messages from the audience, but also in order for them to specify something which is not a proper blob name. Now that will cause my methods to fail because I don't do any checks that is this a proper blob name, can I use that? So I'm going to send myself some funky stuff that doesn't work as a blob name, and I'm going to generate myself some error messages. There, now I've sent myself a couple of more messages which my web job should have picked up by now and processed inside of the portal. So if I go back and show my new invocations inside of the portal, you can see that I have a bunch of failed messages in here, and that's really useful because some of these are just not going to work, and immediately I can see the exact stack trace storage exception when I try to I believe this is when I try to store something in the might be when I store it in the blob. It just doesn't work because the input data is faulty. As you can see, there are only a few of the invocations which have gone through, and there's a bunch of the blob to table ones that have failed. The reason is that I'm using characters which are not proper when writing a row key in a storage table. If I go back to my Azure Storage account once more, you can see that I don't have any new messages inside of my queue, and all of the messages have actually been processed. But you can also see there that there is something funny going on there. There's a WebJobs -blob trigger -poison queue. What does that even mean? Well, when I have failing blob trigger invocations, these fails will be reported to me in a specific poison queue, which I can then monitor and look at and see what was the problem that I encountered. So all of this will give me some nice values here, saying that you can't bind to this name, it just doesn't make any sense, and I can go back and check what was wrong in here. And that's really handy. Some of the messages made it through though, as you can see. The percent testing made it through for some reason as a proper name, and as you can see, some made it through and some were failures, and that was the whole point of the demo. It's kind of fun to see what type of messages you get from a live audience. So that was it. That was the Azure Storage Features demo. I hope you had some fun, because I did. And again, if there is anything, don't hesitate to contact me.